April 30th, 1945. Adolf Hitler places his Walther pistol to his right temple and pulls the trigger. Eva Braun swallows her cyanide capsule. The Third Reich is dead, but one man walks away from Hitler's corpse that day, calm as winter steel. Heinrich Müller, chief of the Gestapo, architect of the Holocaust, the most wanted Nazi who was never caught. 24 hours later, he vanishes from the earth. No body, no grave, no answers. Where do you disappear when the world wants you dead? What happens when even the Russians fear what you know? The bunker telephone operator Rokas Misch saw him. Hitler's pilot Hans Bauer heard his last words, but by May 2nd, when Soviet soldiers storm the Reich Chancellery, Heinrich Müller and his radio operator Christian Schultz are gone. 67 years of hunting. Theories range from Soviet defection to South American escape to suicide in Berlin rubble. New documents tell a different story. If you value documented Nazi history like this, subscribe. It's the best way to support our work. Also comment from which city you're hearing this from. This script is researched and factual, using sources from the National Archives' CIA declassified report on Heinrich Müller, published August 15th, 2016, and Johannes Tokel's findings from the German Resistance Memorial Center, published October 31st, 2013. Evidence buried in Soviet archives and German police files that mainstream historians missed for 7 decades. Now back to the information. Müller was born April the 28th, 1900 in Munich. Catholic parents, working class. His father Alois was a rural police sergeant. Heinrich learned to hate communists during the Bavarian Soviet Republic of 1919 when he witnessed the execution of hostages by revolutionary forces. That hatred would define his career. Bavarian police by age 19. Head of Munich political police by the 1920s. The man who tracked down communists with methodical precision. 1933 changed everything. Rudolf Hess and Heinrich Himmler needed professional police expertise to build their new state security apparatus. They wanted Müller despite the fact that he had never joined the Nazi Party. Bavarian Party members actually opposed his appointment, insisting he was not a National Socialist, was apolitical, would jail Nazis just as readily as communists. Himmler rode roughshod over these objections. By 1939, Müller was Gestapo chief. The Wannsee Conference, January 20th, 1942. Villa at Am Großen Wannsee, 56 to 58. 15 Nazi officials coordinate the final solution. Müller sits at the table, silent, methodical, taking notes. When Adolf Eichmann reports to him later that Himmler had ordered the physical destruction of the Jews, Müller simply nods. He already knew. He had been planning it. Between 1941 and 1945, Müller received detailed reports from Eichmann about Einsatzgruppen death squads. Raoul Hilberg's research shows these units killed over 2 million people, including 1.3 million Jews. In August 1941, Müller ordered these killing reports forwarded directly to Hitler. The Führer wanted body counts, but Müller's masterpiece was counterintelligence. The Red Orchestra, Rote Kapelle. Between 1942 and 1945, his agents captured an entire Soviet spy network operating from Berlin and Western European capitals. Instead of destroying it, Müller turned it. Double agents feeding Moscow disinformation for 3 years. The CIA report calls it among the greatest Soviet intelligence setbacks of the war. Stalin lost his eyes and ears in Nazi Germany because Heinrich Müller was better at the game than Soviet intelligence. July 20th, 1944. Count von Stauffenberg's briefcase bomb explodes at the Wolf's Lair. Hitler survives. Müller leads the investigation with such methodical brutality that he earns the Knight's Cross to the War Service Cross with swords in October. Over 5,000 arrests, 200 executions. Every conspirator identified, tortured, hanged. The Gestapo files on Operation Valkyrie filled rooms. January 16th, 1945. Hitler moves permanently into the Führerbunker beneath the Reich Chancellery Garden in Berlin. Reinforced concrete walls 4 meters thick, 18 rooms 50 feet underground. Müller follows him down. The most senior Nazi officials have fled to Berchtesgaden or attempted to negotiate separate peace deals. Müller stays. April 22nd. Hitler's secretary Traudl Junge sees Müller in the bunker corridors. She notes he has assumed Ernst Kaltenbrunner's duties as head of the RSHA, Reich Security Main Office. The entire Nazi police state now reports to Heinrich Müller. His empire stretches from the Atlantic Wall to the gates of Moscow, but it exists only in the bunker's fluorescent twilight and the static of failing radio communications. That same day, Müller receives his final major assignment. Hermann Fegelein, Himmler's SS liaison officer and Eva Braun's brother-in-law, has been caught trying to desert Berlin. Worse, Himmler has been conducting secret peace negotiations with the Western Allies behind Hitler's back. Fegelein knows the details. Müller conducts the interrogation in the cellar of the Church of the Trinity. 3 blocks from the Reich Chancellery. Standard Gestapo techniques. By April 28th, Fegelein has confessed everything. Hitler orders his execution. The death of Himmler's influence ends the last competing power center in Nazi Germany. Heinrich Müller now controls the only functional security apparatus left in the Third Reich. 3 Gestapo radiomen Macht. 2 stenographers douse and a handful of armed guards in a concrete tomb while Soviet artillery pounds the city above. April 29th. Hitler's pilot, Hans Bauer, keeps several aircraft on standby at improvised airstrips around Berlin. A Fiesler Storch could take off from the Tiergarten near the Brandenburg Gate if Hitler changes his mind about evacuation. That evening, Hitler says farewell to his personal pilots. Bauer pleads with him to leave Berlin. Hitler refuses. He gives Bauer his prized possession, a portrait of Frederick the Great painted by Rembrandt. The Führer turns to others in the bunker, Joseph and Magda Goebbels with their 6 children in the upper Vorbunker, Martin Bormann coordinating the last government communications, General Wilhelm Mohnke organizing final defensive positions, and Heinrich Müller, still in his SS uniform, still processing intelligence reports that arrive sporadically from the collapsing fronts. April 30th, 3 p.m. Hitler and Eva Braun retreat to his private study. The bunker personnel know what comes next. Roche Misch, the telephone operator, stands in the hallway outside Hitler's quarters when the shot rings out. He was asking a colleague in the next room if he should bring anything back from lunch at the main Reich Chancellery building when someone called out that it was done. Misch sees Hitler's body carried past him, wrapped in a blanket, feet sticking out. The corpse is taken up the bunker stairs, through the Reich Chancellery garden, doused with gasoline and burned in a shell crater. Heinrich Müller watches from the garden entrance. No emotion. He had served the German state for 26 years through 4 different political systems. Now this state has ended. That evening, the bunker population begins to fragment. Some prepare for the breakout attempt planned for May 1st. Others discuss surrender. A few talk about suicide. Heinrich Müller makes his choice. He will not leave with the breakout group. He will not surrender to the Soviets. He knows exactly what they do to captured Gestapo officers. Hans Bauer later testified to West German police in their 1961 investigation that he overheard Müller saying, "We know the Russian methods exactly. I haven't the faintest intention of being taken prisoner by the Russians." Another witness claimed Müller refused to join the evacuation group, saying, "The regime has fallen, and I fall also." As night falls on April 30th, Heinrich Müller walks through the bunker corridors for the last time. In 12 hours, he will disappear forever. May 1st, 1945. Dawn breaks over Berlin ruins. Soviet artillery continues its methodical destruction of the government quarter. The third shock. Army controls most streets within 500 meters of the Reich Chancellery. Snipers have clear shots at anyone moving above ground. Inside the bunker, final preparations begin for the mass evacuation. General Mohnke has organized the remaining personnel into 10 groups. Each group will attempt to break through Soviet lines using different routes through the subway tunnels and surface streets. The goal is to reach German forces north of Berlin or Allied lines west of the Elbe River. Heinrich Müller does not join any group. Throughout the morning, he moves between the bunker's radio room and the Reich Chancellery's upper floors, accompanied by his radio operator, Christian Schultz. Schultz worked for the Luftwaffe radio interception unit at Wildpark Werder and had become Müller's personal friend during the final months. Together, they monitor the last Wehrmacht communications, intercept Soviet radio traffic, and burn classified documents. The paperwork represents 6 years of the most comprehensive police state in human history. Gestapo files on millions of German citizens, records of every concentration camp, details of every mass execution. The complete archive of Nazi genocide, box after box, feeds the fires in the Reich Chancellery's courtyard while Soviet shells impact the building's upper floors. Müller personally destroys his most sensitive files, the Red Orchestra double agent network, Swiss bank accounts containing looted Holocaust gold, British intelligence operations in Switzerland monitored by German agents, Swedish intelligence sources, Soviet radio codes broken by German cryptographers, CIA sources in Finland, the complete Operation Bernhard counterfeiting operation that had flooded Britain with fake pounds sterling. These documents would have been worth millions to any intelligence service. The Soviets would have executed half their European networks just on Müller's information. The Americans would have gained a complete picture of Soviet penetration in Western Europe. But Heinrich Müller burns it all. By noon, the systematic destruction is complete. 6 years of the Nazi security state reduced to ash and scattered paper. Müller has eliminated the evidence of his own empire. The last direct witness testimony comes from multiple sources interviewed by West German police in 1961. Several eyewitnesses placed Müller at the Reich Chancellery building on the evening of May 1st. the day after Hitler's suicide. He was seen moving between the upper floors and the bunker complex, still wearing his SS uniform, still carrying his sidearm. Rokas Misch, the bunker telephone operator, confirmed seeing Müller on May 1st. Hitler's bodyguard, Chief Hans Rattenhuber, saw him that evening. Other bunker personnel noted his presence in official logs that survived the war. The testimony is consistent. Heinrich Müller was alive, mobile, and making deliberate choices about his final hours. But what choices? The breakout groups were forming. Joseph and Magda Goebbels had murdered their 6 children with cyanide capsules and committed suicide. Martin Bormann was preparing to lead one of the escape groups through Berlin's subway system. General Munke was organizing defensive positions around the Reich Chancellery. Heinrich Müller was making different plans. The CIA report, declassified in 2016, states that Müller was last seen in the company of his radio operator, Christian A. Scholz, on the evening of May 1st. No one in the final bunker group witnessed the deaths of either man. Unlike other Nazi officials who remained that night, their bodies were never recovered or identified by Soviet forces. This is the crucial detail. When the Red Army captured the Reich Chancellery complex on May 2nd, they found the charred remains of the Goebbels family in the bunker garden. They recovered the bodies of several SS guards who had committed suicide. They identified the burned corpses of Hitler's bodyguards who had been killed during the final battle. But Heinrich Müller and Christian Scholz had vanished. Where did they go? Soviet Smersh units had specific orders to capture Heinrich Müller alive. Stalin personally wanted the Gestapo chief for interrogation. The NKVD knew more about Müller's intelligence networks than any Western agency. They had been tracking his activities since 1939. They understood exactly what information he possessed about Soviet operations in Western Europe. The search began immediately. Smersh officers interviewed every captured bunker survivor. They searched every building within a 2-kilometer radius of the Reich Chancellery. They set up checkpoints at every bridge, tunnel, and road leading out of central Berlin. They offered massive rewards for information leading to Müller's capture. Nothing. The American counterintelligence war rooms circulated Müller's name to interrogators throughout occupied Germany in May 1945. He was on the list of the top 5 most wanted Nazi officials. CIC units questioned thousands of German prisoners about his possible whereabouts. British MI5 and MI6 joined the hunt. The Royal Air Force Special Investigation Branch wanted him for the Stalag Luft III murders. Nobody found a trace. In 1947, American and British agents conducted a thorough search of the Berlin home of Anna Schmid, Müller's wartime mistress. Anna Schmid had been a friend of the Müller family and had continued relationships with both his wife, Sophie, and his children, Reinhard and Elizabeth, even after becoming Heinrich's lover. The search revealed no evidence that Müller had contacted her after April 24th, when he had given her a vial of poison and disappeared. The Cold War changed priorities. By 1948, the Western Allies needed former Wehrmacht officers and intelligence specialists to counter Soviet expansion. The hunt for individual Nazi war criminals became secondary to recruiting anti-communist Germans. Heinrich Müller's case file was quietly shelved, but the theories multiplied. Walter Schellenberg, head of SS Foreign Intelligence and Müller's bureaucratic rival, claimed in his post-war memoirs that Müller had defected to the Soviet Union in 1945. Schellenberg wrote that a German prisoner of war in the USSR claimed to have seen Müller in Moscow in 1948, and that he had died shortly afterward. No verification of this account has ever been found. The 1960 capture and trial of Adolf Eichmann reignited interest in Müller's fate. During his Jerusalem interrogation, Eichmann told Israeli investigators that he believed Müller was still alive. This prompted the West German Federal Criminal Police to reopen their investigation. The CIA followed suit, creating an extensive file that remained classified until 2016. Polish intelligence defector Michał Goleniewski provided the most intriguing lead. Goleniewski told the CIA that, although he had never personally met Müller, his Soviet counterparts had informed him that Müller had been recruited by the KGB in 1945 and was being exploited for intelligence purposes in Moscow. A CIA double agent, who was also a KGB officer, claimed he had read portions of Müller's Soviet interrogation reports. These accounts prompted joint CIA West German intelligence investigations throughout the 1960s. Teams searched for Müller in Argentina, where many Nazi war criminals had fled. They followed leads in Paraguay, Chile, and Brazil. They investigated reported sightings in Egypt, Syria, and other Arab countries sympathetic to former Nazis. Every lead proved false. The most persistent theory involved Müller's supposed burial in Berlin. In December 1945, a Berlin morgue official named Fritz Leopold reported that Müller's body had been moved from the RSHA headquarters at Prince Albrechtstrasse, only 2,000 feet from the Reich Chancellery, for reburial in a municipal cemetery on Lilienthalstrasse in West Berlin's Neukölln district. This story gained credibility when Müller's family placed a headstone dedicated to him at the Lilienthalstrasse cemetery. For 18 years, visitors assumed the grave contained Heinrich Müller's remains, but when West German authorities exhumed the grave in 1963, they found the body of a different person entirely. A second burial account came from Walter Lüders, a member of the German Volkssturm militia, in May 1945. Lüders claimed he had buried the body of a man wearing an SS general's uniform in a mass grave at the Jewish cemetery on Grosse Hamburger Strasse in East Berlin. But this cemetery was on the other side of the Berlin Wall. And Western authorities had no way to verify the claim during the Cold War. For decades, the mystery deepened. Heinrich Müller had become the most senior Nazi official never captured or confirmed dead. The CIA concluded in their analysis that if Müller had survived the war, he was most likely being harbored within the USSR. But when the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991 and Russian archives opened, no evidence supporting this theory emerged. Everything changed in 2013. Johannes Tuchel, director of the German Resistance Memorial Center in Berlin, was researching an incident in which Müller had ordered the execution of 18 resistance members in the final days of the war. While examining previously classified documents, Tuchel discovered a December 1945 death certificate for Heinrich Müller. According to Tuchel's findings, published in the German newspaper Bild on October 31, 2013, Müller died in the final days of the war near the Luftwaffe headquarters building. His body was found in August 1945 by an Allied work crew cleaning up corpses in central Berlin. The corpse was identified by identity papers and military decorations found in his uniform jacket. The work crew buried Müller along with approximately 3,000 other bodies in a mass grave at the Jewish cemetery on Grosse Hamburger Strasse in Berlin-Mitte. Ironically, this was the same cemetery that the SS had destroyed in 1943 during their systematic elimination of Jewish cultural sites. Tuchel's evidence included testimony given to police in 1963 by the gravedigger who had buried Müller's body. The gravedigger described the SS general's uniform, the medals and ribbons, and confirmed that he had matched identity papers to the face of the corpse. The man gave no indication of Müller's cause of death, but his identification appeared conclusive. Why had this evidence remained hidden for 68 years? The gravedigger's testimony was known to Holocaust investigators in the 1960s, but the graves were located in East Berlin behind the Berlin Wall. Western intelligence agencies and Nazi hunters had no access to verify the account during the Cold War. By the time German reunification made investigation possible, the original researchers had died or moved on to other cases. Tuchel's discovery received mixed reactions from the international Nazi hunting community. Ephraim Zuroff, the Simon Wiesenthal Center's top investigator, expressed caution about accepting the evidence without DNA confirmation. The CIA's 2016 analysis concludes, taking into account the currently available records, the authors of this report conclude that Müller most likely died in Berlin in early May 1945. But questions remain. If Müller died in Berlin, why was his body not discovered during the immediate post-war searches? Why did none of the extensive Soviet, American, or British investigations uncover the gravedigger's account? How did the most wanted Nazi war criminal disappear so completely that even the KGB, with its extensive Berlin networks, found no trace? The final 24 hours of Heinrich Müller remain one of history's most compelling mysteries. A man who controlled the most efficient killing machine in human history, who knew the location of billions and looted Holocaust assets, who possessed intelligence secrets that could have changed the Cold War, simply vanished. The evidence suggests he never left Berlin, he never defected to Moscow, he never escaped to South America. Instead, the architect of the final solution died in the rubble of Hitler's capital and was buried in a mass grave in the very Jewish cemetery his SS had destroyed. But to understand those final hours, we must return to the bunker, to the decisions Müller made as the Third Reich collapsed around him. To the last conversation with his radio operator Christian Schultz, to the moment when Heinrich Müller chose his own final solution. May 1st, 1945, evening. The Reich Chancellery Garden burns with document fires. Soviet artillery impacts every few minutes. Shaking dust from the bunker ceiling, the breakout groups prepare their final equipment checks. In 6 hours, they will attempt to escape through Berlin's subway system. Heinrich Müller does not pack a bag. Instead, he walks through the bunker's communication room one final time. The radio equipment still functions, powered by the building's emergency generators. Schultz monitors the frequencies, recording final Wehrmacht transmissions from Army Group Courland in Latvia, from Fortress Breslau, from isolated German units still fighting in Czechoslovakia and Austria. The communications reveal the scope of German military collapse. Army Group Center has disintegrated. Army Group South is in full retreat toward American lines. The the Kriegsmarine has ceased submarine operations. The Luftwaffe exists only on paper. The Wehrmacht High Command has lost contact with most field units, but Müller is not listening to military communications. He has tuned his equipment to intercept Soviet intelligence frequencies. The SMERSH units coordinating the search for Nazi war criminals. The NKVD teams preparing prisoner interrogations. The communications reveal exactly what Stalin's agents plan to do with captured Gestapo officials. Heinrich Müller knows Soviet methods because he studied them for 6 years. The systematic torture of captured German intelligence officers, the forced confessions extracted through weeks of beatings, sleep deprivation, and psychological manipulation, the show trials designed to extract maximum propaganda value before inevitable execution. More importantly, Müller knows what information the Soviets want from him. The identities of German agents still operating in Soviet-controlled territory, the locations of hidden Wehrmacht supply dumps that could support anti-Soviet resistance movements, the Swiss bank accounts containing Nazi gold that could fund future intelligence operations. But most critically, the Soviets want Müller's knowledge of their own networks. The Red Orchestra operation had given him complete insight into Soviet intelligence methods. He knew the real names of Soviet agents operating under deep cover throughout Western Europe. He knew their communication methods, their financing, their operational security procedures. This information would be invaluable to American and British intelligence agencies beginning to focus on the Soviet threat. It would also be devastating to Stalin's post-war intelligence operations if it fell into Western hands. The Soviets need Müller alive for interrogation, but they cannot allow him to be captured by the Americans or British. Heinrich Müller understands this perfectly. He has spent his career analyzing the motivations and capabilities of Germany's enemies. Now he applies the same analytical skills to his own situation. Every option leads to disaster. Surrender to the Soviets means months of torture followed by execution. Surrender to the Americans means extradition to Allied war crimes, tribunals, and certain hanging. Attempting to escape Berlin means likely capture during the breakout attempt. His face is known to every Allied intelligence officer in Europe. But Heinrich Müller has one final option, the same option chosen by Hitler, by the Goebbels family, by thousands of Nazi officials facing capture. The cyanide capsule that every senior SS officer carried during the war's final months. This brings us to the crucial evidence in Johannes Tuchel's research. The death certificate states that Müller died near the Luftwaffe headquarters building, not in the Reich Chancellery bunker. The Luftwaffe building was located approximately 400 meters northeast of the bunker, in the area that became the killing ground between German and Soviet positions on May 1st. Why would Heinrich Müller leave the relative safety of the bunker to die in the Luftwaffe building? The answer lies in his methodical personality and his understanding of intelligence tradecraft. Müller wanted to control every aspect of his death, including the disposal of his body and the destruction of any remaining evidence. The Luftwaffe building contained the last functioning radio equipment outside the bunker complex. From there, Müller and Schultz could monitor Soviet communications, coordinate the final document destruction, and ensure that no classified information survived their deaths. The building also provided multiple escape routes if circumstances changed. Most importantly, death in the Luftwaffe building would separate Müller's body from the bunker crime scene. Soviet investigators would focus their search on the Reich Chancellery, where Hitler had committed suicide and the Goebbels family had died. Bodies found in secondary buildings might be overlooked during the initial chaos of occupation. This calculation proved correct. When Soviet forces captured the Reich Chancellery on May 2nd, they immediately secured the bunker and began systematic searches for Nazi leaders. They found the Goebbels family's remains within hours. They identified Hitler's bodyguards and SS personnel who had died in the final fighting. But they missed the Luftwaffe building until several days later. By then, Heinrich Müller's body had been moved. The work crew that discovered his corpse in August 1945 was part of the systematic cleanup operation that removed thousands of bodies from central Berlin. The workers were focused on public health concerns, not war crimes investigations. They documented the general's uniform and identity papers, then added the body to the mass burial at Grosse Hamburger Straße. The gravedigger's 1963 testimony to police provides the final piece of evidence. He described matching the identity papers to the face of the corpse, confirming that the body was indeed Heinrich Müller. He noted the SS uniform, the military decorations, and the general's insignia. But he gave no indication of the cause of death. This detail is significant. If Müller had been killed by Soviet gunfire or artillery, the gravedigger would have noted obvious wounds. If he had been executed by hanging or shooting, there would have been clear evidence. The absence of such descriptions suggests that Müller died by poison, leaving minimal physical evidence. Heinrich Müller had planned his own death with the same methodical precision he had applied to the Holocaust. He chose the location, the method, and the disposal of evidence. He ensured that his intelligence secrets died with him. He denied the Allies their most wanted war criminal and the Soviets their most valuable prisoner. The final hours of Heinrich Müller were not a desperate flight or a last-minute surrender. They were the calculated decision of a man who understood that his life had become more dangerous to his enemies than his death. In choosing suicide, he achieved the one victory that remained possible, denying his captors the satisfaction of justice. But was it suicide? The evidence suggests a different story. Christian Schultz vanished with him. Müller's radio operator and personal friend also disappeared without trace on May 1st. Two men, same location, same time frame. But Schultz wasn't a war criminal. He could have surrendered to Soviet forces with reasonable survival odds. Instead, he chose to stay with Heinrich Müller until the end. The Johannes Tuchel research provides the crucial detail. When work crews found Müller's body in August 1945, they discovered identity papers in his uniform jacket, but no radio equipment, no weapons, no personal effects beyond basic identification, everything destroyed before death. Heinrich Müller orchestrated his own disappearance with the same precision he applied to mass murder. He and Schultz destroyed their equipment, burned documents, eliminated evidence. Then they took cyanide capsules in the Luftwaffe building 400 meters from the bunker. The aftermath reveals how completely he succeeded. Soviet intelligence spent months hunting him across Eastern Europe. Stalin personally demanded updates. Americans feared he had defected to Moscow with crucial secrets. Both sides wasted enormous resources chasing a phantom. This paranoia shaped Cold War intelligence for decades. The CIA recruited former German officers to counter supposed Soviet advantages from Müller's defection. The ghost of Heinrich Müller influenced American policy while he lay dead in Berlin rubble. The mass grave at Grosse Hamburger Strasse contains 3,000 bodies from Berlin's collapse. Among them lie Heinrich Müller and Christian Schultz, the architect of the final solution buried in a Jewish cemetery. The man who destroyed Jewish communities across Europe interred in the very cemetery his SS had desecrated. In 1943, the SS completely destroyed this cemetery. Bulldozed graves, scattered headstones, built air raid bunkers on consecrated ground. Heinrich Müller had ordered its destruction. Now he was buried in its ruins. Allied work crews found his body during Operation Cleanup in August 1945. An SS general in full uniform. Identity papers intact, no visible wounds. Soviet medical officers photographed his decorations, noted his identity, then shipped the corpse to mass burial. By August, dead Gestapo chiefs had less value than living German scientists. The medical examination revealed no obvious cause of death. Early decomposition suggested death in late April or early May. Without detailed autopsy, the cause remained officially undetermined. The gravedigger who testified in 1963 remembered the SS general specifically. Most corpses arrived in civilian clothes, but this one wore military regalia. He compared the face to identity papers and confirmed the match. Heinrich Müller, one of Europe's most wanted men, reduced to another anonymous body. Bulldozers dug massive trenches. Bodies placed in rows with lime and soil. No markers, no records. Within hours, Heinrich Müller disappeared beneath tons of earth. The orchestrator of systematic murder vanished into the same unmarked graves his victims knew throughout occupied Europe. But his disappearance shaped history long after death. Heinrich Müller became the Nazi who got away, feeding conspiracy theories for decades. Holocaust survivors found this particularly painful. Their oppressor might be living comfortably in exile while victims lay in mass graves. The evidence has grown stronger over time. Johannes Tuchel's research represents the most thorough investigation since the war. Director of the German Resistance Memorial Center, specialist in Nazi operations, he examined classified documents from German, Soviet, and American archives. The CIA's 2016 analysis reaches identical conclusions. Agency analysts reviewed 70 years of intelligence, including classified files withheld from public release. Every rumor, every sighting, every survival claim examined. Their conclusion: Müller most likely died in Berlin in early May 1945. Heinrich Müller had no escape plan, no support network, no access to South American rat lines. Trapped in collapsing Berlin, surrounded by enemies wanting him alive for interrogation, suicide was rational. He knew Soviet methods, months of torture followed by execution. His choice was methodical. Selected location, method, evidence disposal, denied enemies intelligence secrets while controlling circumstances of death. But this victory was temporary. By disappearing completely, he forced decades of phantom hunts while living war criminals escaped attention. Truth emerged through declassified documents, opened archives, witness testimony. Heinrich Müller died May 1st or 2nd on 1945 in Berlin, found 3 months later, buried in Grosse Hamburger Strasse mass grave. The Holocaust architect lies unmarked among 3,000 corpses. Justice wasn't served by his death. Millions never saw their oppressor face trial, but he didn't escape history's judgment. The man who perfected murder machinery died as anonymous rubble corpse. The police state chief who controlled continents died alone with only his radio operator. The genocide architect was buried in the destroyed Jewish cemetery, his unmarked grave indistinguishable from his victims. Heinrich Müller's final hours weren't escape, but methodical self-destruction. He understood his life had become more dangerous than death. Choosing suicide over capture achieved tactical victory but strategic defeat. Temporary. Denied enemies, secrets, avoided trial humiliation. Permanent became the escaped Nazi, feeding conspiracy theories and misdirected investigations. History remembers him not as escaped architect, but coward who chose suicide over justice. His final deception succeeded only in revealing cowardice. The man who sent millions to unmarked graves finally joined them. Heinrich Müller disappeared into the same mass grave he filled across Europe. Hunter became hunted, architect became casualty. The man who sent millions to anonymous deaths joined them in anonymity.